So we'll start talking about the digestive process, like from start to finish. So where it starts all the way through to the bit at the end. But where it starts is actually in the brain. So you actually start the digestive process in your body as soon as your senses start to detect and anticipate food. Um, that's when your body kind of starts to switch states and puts it and starts signaling the fact that you're about to eat. Um, it'll start to increase production of hydrochloric acid in your stomach, digestive enzymes, and saliva. If if you're eating on the go and you're stressed and you're doing it too quick, you don't get the full effect of that reflex of that pre-preparation and anticipation. So probably more important than we think is the actual kind of sitting down and preparing yourself to eat something rather than literally just grabbing something and wolfing it down, which something I probably do quite a lot myself. When you go into chewing, which is essentially we know what this is for. It's breaking food down into smaller pieces, so that when it does go through into the stomach and then into the small intestines, it is actually in a state that can be increasing the surface area of the food that's working its way downstream. So that surface area is more open to the enzymes and everything else that's actually starting to act to do its job. And it's actually reducing the amount of work on your stomach and the intestines later on. So it's everything has a downstream effect. So the better prepared and the more efficient everything is at the beginning, it means cutting that down further down the different stages. The worse you start off, the more stress you're going to put on your digestive system as it passes through. Um, Saliva in your mouth contains the enzyme amylase. So hydrates are actually the only macros that are digested in your mouth. Nothing else does. Um, yes, you're chewing it. Yes, you're physically breaking up the food, but the actual digestion and the start of the breakdown chemically only happens to carbs, nothing else. Um, so poor chewing alone can impair digestion later on. Obviously, larger food particles are going to put a heavier strain on because your stomach is like flexing and churning the food round as well. Um, this increases fermentation, which means you end up getting that bloating and gassiness. Interestingly, your stomach's only responsible for breaking down protein. It doesn't actually digest anything else. So carbs start to get broken down in your mouth. They don't get broken down any further in your stomach, and neither do fats. Your stomach is solely responsible for breaking protein down. And that is, if you remember back to the one that we did about the the makeup of protein, you've got the proteins themselves, which are then broken down into peptides, which are chains of amino acids. So you start with amino acids, they get bunched together into chains of peptides, then the peptides get grouped together to form specific proteins. So then as it's going through into the stomach, the first part of that to happen is breaking down of the proteins into the peptides, if that makes sense. So your stomach produces hydrochloric acid. That environment then activates the pepsin enzyme, and that starts breaking everything down. The acid in your stomach is also responsible for removing any bacteria that's in the rest of your food. So yes, it doesn't really digest your carbs and your fats, but if there's any bacteria within them, the acid in your stomach is responsible for killing those as well. And it's also responsible for the absorption of minerals like zinc, calcium, magnesium, and iron. Though this was a new one for me, I'll be brutally honest. Um, I thought everything was digested in the stomach, but it's not. One of the biggest causes of all stomach issues is low stomach acid. So when you've got too little stomach acid, one, your stomach can't break the proteins down, or it becomes very, very difficult and stays in the stomach longer, begins to ferment, and then you get that gassiness and the bloating as well. So everyone thinks that acid reflux is a cause of too much stomach acid. It's actually the other way around. If your stomach acid is too low, the stomach acid itself is responsible for um, closing part of your lower esophagus. So if that's not allowed to close, the contents can then move upwards. So it's actually low stomach acid that causes acid reflux. People who have low stomach acid also tend to be the people who are the ones that you hear say, oh, I can't eat in the morning. I don't feel like eating in the morning. The idea of eating eggs or steak or chicken or any kind of protein just like makes us feel sick. It's people with low stomach acid, and that low stomach acid is sending signals to the brain that it's telling them that they don't want to eat those foods, and it makes them favor carbs instead. Low stomach acid, one of the major causes of having low stomach acid is stress. So people who are chronically stressed through work and anything else are also the ones that tend to wake up in the morning and not feel hungry and have no appetite. So I would imagine there'll be a few people who do watch the rerun of this, dotting nod their heads like, "Oh yeah, yeah, that's me." So once your protein's been broken down into peptides, everything else, along with the carbs that were digested in your mouth, and now the fats, go into your small intestines. So basically, this is the main area where everything is broken down further. So your proteins into amino acids, um, fats are emulsified with bile, and your carbohydrates are broken down into their different sugar chains. So the picture we've got there is what the insides of your intestines look like, and it's basically you've got these really long fingers sticking out, almost like a brush surface, and then those fingers also have little micro um, antennae or brooches sticking out, and this is basically just increasing the surface area of the inside of your gut to give it a bigger area to be able to absorb everything in that it needs. So, like I said before, if the starting point is digestion, so you're chewing, and then what happens in the stomach, if that is if that's poor at the beginning, you're then forcing larger, um, less broken down chunks into the small intestine that it's forced to deal with, and it's not actually designed for that. So this is going to start causing inflammation and irritation, and it's also going to trigger immune response. Then you move on to large intestines. Um, there is no further digestion here. This is where basically you're reabsorbing water and electrolytes, you're fermenting all the fiber, you're producing short chain fatty acids, and you're starting to synthesize vitamins and obviously forming stools. Short chain fatty acids um, are basically critical for keeping your gut lining healthy, controlling inflammation, immune system signaling, and just the overall health of your metabolism. what we've got in these two different areas, so you've got one in the small intestine, one in the large intestine, is called a microbiome, and these are basically environments, two separate environments, and each one is an environment composed of um, a selection of different bacteria, and some people between different people, some people might have a different mix or different concentration of these different bacteria, um, which gives them different responses to different foods, which is why some people have allergies and intolerances. But this whole microbiome, this whole ecosystem of bacteria, um, this is a really big one. It's it's majorly responsible for your entire immune system, for inflammation, for metabolizing your hormones, for insulin sensitivity. But the big one is 80%, or no, that's for immune tissue. 90% of the neurotransmitters which signal for the production of serotonin and dopamine are made in your gut. So when you talk about having a gut feel for something, or this is kind of what it's referring to, that they refer to your gut as being your body's second brain. So when your digestion is hampered and you're inflamed and not in a good place, you're basically switching off the neurotransmitters which are helping to produce your feel good hormones and your reward hormones, which is why when you eat a load of crap, you feel like crap. It's also why your immune system goes to crap as well. If you're constantly eating rubbish all the time, you are basically hindering 80% of the immune tissue, which is actually helping you fight. It's helping your immune system fight inflammation and any bad stuff coming in. What's next? There's a state called dysbiosis. So this is when the entire system falls out of balance. And this is the difference between beneficial bacteria in your gut and harmful bacteria in food that's coming in. So common causes of this can be chronic stress. So obviously, if you're stressed, your levels of hydrochloric acid become low. You're not killing off all the bacteria, so it's actually passing through from your stomach into the small intestines. Antibiotics, which effectively is killing off all the good bacteria in your intestines, which is why doctors will often prescribe probiotics or tell you to supplement with probiotics when you're taking antibiotics. Ultra processed foods and excessive refined sugar foods also cause this, along with alcohol, sugars, and artificial sweeteners, and low stomach acid itself. And obviously, the symptoms of these are bloating, excessive gas, fatigue, food sensitivities, unpredictable digestive reactions, which I think at some point in time, nearly every one of us have had at some point or other. Processed foods, refined sugars in particular, are more responsible for feeding the non-beneficial bacteria, which disrupt the entire ecosystem. So looking at all of this is why people tolerate foods much differently to each other. And it's not necessarily the food, it's the environment within their system. Your gut lining acts as the barrier. So you've got short chain fatty acids, which help maintain junctions between the gut cells. When this gets broken, your immune response increases, and this is when you start getting inflammation. Transit time throughout your digestive process, throughout the whole digestive system, this plays a big part as well. If your transit time is too slow from start to finish, you end up constipated. This is slowing the detoxification process, there's a lot of outside. What's the best bit? What's the best way to describe this? There are things that you can find in food that find their way into food and into your body that are in just the general atmosphere. A lot of these are particular types of estrogens. These can be passed through into your body by food and need to be removed. And if they're not, through constipation, you can actually start to reabsorb these. And this is what can cause hormone imbalances, which can particularly cause, especially in women, to hold body fat more in their lower bodies. Then poor gut health is also um, linked with poor immune balance, increasing illness, and slower training recovery. Small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. This is when bacteria migrate into the small intestine. So this is what I mentioned before about if it's not killed off in the stomach, this is when it starts to pass through into your small intestines. Um, Again, the symptoms are gas, bloating, and fatigue, and unpredictable responses to foods. Again, this is not a food problem. This is to do with your environment as a whole. Why is my slide not coming up? Weird. If I could paint a figure again. Right. So these are a few practical things that we can look at. If you are suffering any of these digestive issues, like here's some things that you can do. Obviously, starting from the beginning, chewing more thoroughly, making sure that you chew long enough. I'm probably really guilty of this because I tend to eat on the go quite a lot and not sit down and take my time. Lemon, lime juice, and salt can actually support an increase in stomach acid. So one thing I read was drinking a pint of water first thing in the morning with some lemon and lime juice in it and some salt can actually help start to activate more stomach acid and actually squeezing a little bit of lime juice over your meals. Probiotics are not necessarily something that you need because you already have those bacteria in your body. It's actually prebiotic foods that you need. That prebiotic foods are foods that specifically feed the probiotic bacteria that you've already got, rather than trying to add more of them in. So these would be things like onions, leeks, garlic, bananas, and oats. Fermented foods. So again, yogurt, sauerkraut, and kimchi. Has anyone had any of these? We tried kimchi a couple of months ago. I didn't mind it actually. Claire wasn't too keen, but I thought it was all right. Has anyone had sauerkraut? Yeah. Sauerkraut.
Sauerkraut with cabbage with salt on. It's lovely. I love that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Um, Big mistake people make is overeating fiber. They think just because they're having stomach issues, they think the first thing the go-to is need more fiber, and then they'll overdo fiber. If you've actually got too much fiber in your body, your body can't digest fiber as it is anyway. Um, which is why fiber does what it does. Um, and part of the process of your body dealing with fiber is the fermentation process. So if you've got too much of that, it can actually aggravate your stomach even more, especially raw vegetables. So a lot of people will just stick more and more raw vegetables in when actually it's better to cook your vegetables and not overdo the fiber side of things. There is some evidence to suggest that when you're talking about protein sources, you can start to develop an intolerance over time if you eat the same sources every day. But in the real world, how many people really are able to keep switching their protein sources around? I think everyone in the world eats chicken pretty much on a daily basis. Maybe even the same with eggs. To think you can just go beef, chicken, fish on alternate days for everything isn't not really realistic. But it might be something to bear in mind and consider every now and again, just try and switch it up and rotating your sources a bit. Drinking enough water, obviously everyone should be drinking 3 to 4 litres of water a day, minimum. The amount of people I've spoke to that said, oh yeah, I drink loads, I drink about 2 litres a day, nowhere near enough. Stress is the big one though. The link between chronic stress and low hydrochloric acid levels in your stomach is really high, and that's probably the big one. Using probiotics only when needed. So if you're on antibiotics, then it's a good idea to use probiotics. Otherwise, you're better off sticking to prebiotic foods. Avoid excessive ultra-processed foods and artificial sweeteners. You can actually buy digestive supplements that contain hydrochloric acid and digestive enzymes. So there's a few things that you can possibly try if you're having issues. Was any of this new to anyone?
Yeah, I didn't know you could get supplements.
Is that the only thing? That was the last sentence of the last 20 minutes.
No, there's lots that I didn't know. I think I knew about the chewing and stuff like that.
I think the big one for me was not really knowing, about how your mouth only digests carbs, your stomach only does protein, and then everything else, everywhere else.
You just assume that you swallow it and everything goes to your stomach and it gets dealt with there.
Aye.
Every day's a school day, as you say.
Absolutely.
A lot of questions about vegans, really. Why we have a stomach in the first place if its only job is to break down protein.
Aye.
Cool. Any questions on that one?
No.